Welcome to the third and final video tutorial of the Pretty Potions and Poisons Apothecary event. In this tutorial, I'll cover books, coffins, and cauldrons, all essentials for a witch's apothecary. Let's get started. I just want to remind you that you don't have to worry about taking notes during this tutorial, writing down measurements, that sort of thing, because I will have the PDF document for you on my blog that has the tools you'll need, the products I use from Alpha Stamps, and all the details for each piece that I'm going to show you. The first thing we're going to work on are books, and here are the papers, the various papers that I used for all of the books. And I'm not going to go through each one with each book. I've got that for you on the website, but this is basically the 4 packs of papers that I used from Alpha Stamps for all of the books that I'm going to show you. A couple other things that I also used are these tapes, and you've seen me use these on the bottles as well. So I've used some of these tapes as well. And then these are sticky borders, which could be used on bottles, but I used a few of these on some of the books. So the first thing we're going to talk about is faux books, books that aren't really books. They just look like books. And I'm going to start with this book here. This is the Cauldron Favorites, and you're going to see that all of the things that I'm showing you, I'm using images from my 2 book spine and label collage sheets, so you'll see me use a lot of these images. So I want to show you first how to make the book cover and the spine. And the way I show you to do this is the way I've done it in all of the books that I'm going to show you, regardless of whether they're a fake book or they're a real book. So the first thing you're going to do is to cut out 2 pieces of chipboard the size of your book. Now, the sizes are in the PDF document, and they're all sized to fit the labels. So if you want yours to be the size that will work with this label, then those are the sizes that I'm giving you. And you need heavy chipboard to do that, for the labels, or for the book covers. And so you'll do 2 of these. I've got one partially done already to make this faster. And what I do is I just apply glue to the chipboard. Stay out here for you. And I just put it on my paper wherever I want it. And I put it about 1/2 inch from the edge. So you're going to want a 1/2 inch edge all the way around here. And that's so that you have enough to turn around the chipboard. And I don't measure it out. I just stick it on there. I measure the chipboard, and then I stick it on the paper, and then I just cut it out. So that's the first step. Now, in order to get really nice corners where you don't have gaps and they're nice and tight, I'm going to show you some tricks to do that. And the first thing you need to do is cut a diagonal at the point of the chipboard, and it's about 1/16 of an inch, and you're going to do that for all 4 sides. So I'm going to cut it here, and cut it here. So now I've got about 1/16 of an inch here. Pre-fold. And it's really important the stiffer your paper is. The stiffer your paper is, the more work it takes to get it to lay down and glue flat to your chipboard. Then it doesn't matter which side you start with, but on one end or the other, apply glue, and then do it to the opposite side. Now with this Tombow multi, it takes just a little bit to get it tacky, so if you're using something like this, you might have to press a little while just to get this to stay down. And then press the opposite side. Now here comes the big trick, and I'll see if the camera can get in tight enough. I'm going to take my fingernail, and I'm just going to press in the very corners of the edge here. And I'm going to do that on both sides. Just press it in a little bit with your fingernails, and then I'm going to apply glue to each end and press it down, and you get a nice corner. You can see the corner. So your paper will overlap, and you'll have a nice clean corner. If you don't do that, then this paper will poke out of the corner, and you get these things poking out. So you want to press that down. Now, you can put a piece of decorative paper on top of this, but if the inside of the book is going to cover all this, you don't need to bother with that, and in this case it does. And I've got another one finished here, so I've got my two covers done. And the next thing is the spine. And of course you could use this for a cover, but I like using it for a spine, and I designed it so that the image would stay here in the middle. And it's going to be white on the other side, so I've glued a piece of decorative paper to it, because you can, you know, if you start looking at the book, you can kind of see down in there. So just to finish it up. And then I kind of pre-fold it where I want the spine to be. So since I want to be able to see Cauldron favorites and all this, then I just kind of, and it's, you know, it's stiff by the time you double it up. So I'm pre-folding where I'm going to want that spine to be. And I want to be sure that I get that whole thing in there. So you can see I've got that in there. And now you want to glue your covers to the inside of the book. And of course, pay attention if there's a directional thing where you want the front cover to go a certain direction. This is kind of just a pattern, so it's not an issue. So you want to glue that on, and then glue the other side on. Now, since this is a faux book, basically we're just going to be filling it with something to make it look like it's a real book. And in the case of this particular faux book, so now we have our cover. In the case of this particular faux book, what I've done is I've just filled it with pieces of chipboard. Or not chipboard, excuse me, cardstock. So this is a really great use of your leftover small pieces of cardstock, is I just cut a whole bunch of pieces of cream colored cardstock from bits and pieces that I had, and just glue them together. I cut them just slightly larger or smaller than the cover, and just put a little glue between each sheet. You don't have to do much, and just glue them together. And you'll know by the thickness of your book how many sheets you need. And then before I glue them inside the book, I twist, you know, I bent them. If you can see here, they're not all even when I glued them together. I don't want them really wonky, but I made sure that they weren't all exactly straight. And then I came in with the Finish Photo ink and distressed them and got a bunch of ink on them. And once I got them all mangled and distressed and whatnot, then I just glued them inside the cover. And that's the faux book. And now one of the other things that you can do with these books is create bookmarks. And that's what I've done with this, with a skeleton here. And I've used the cotter pen, and this cotter pen, these are so nice because you can just stick them in there and on top of the pages or chipboard or whatever you want to use. And the way I did this was this little bead has a hole in it, and I took a needle and thread and put it through the top of this tassel and then through the hole in the bead, then cut that thread and then looped it onto the cotter pin and then hung it from here. Of course, you could do that with a ribbon or whatever else you want to do. So that's one example of the faux book, and all the covers I make for all the books are going to work exactly like this. So another example is this one here, and I've used the borders, the sticky borders. I've used the tape. This is red cardstock, and this is one of the decorative papers from one of the packs. And then inside is just heavy chipboard, and I've just cut pieces the same size, a little bit smaller than the book. I've inked the edges, and there's my faux book. Here's another example. This has also got heavy cardstock in between it, and I've inked this one black. Here I've used the tape, and on the front I have used one of these. Now it's too big, so if you cut it in half and cut some of each end off and put it back together, it's hidden behind this. Then that's kind of an accent for this dimensional embellishment, and it comes in a pack of 2, so this was the other one I could have used. And then I used some of the decorative paper. A lot of these packs have images in them that you can cut out and then use as decoration. So there's another faux book. And here is another example. Here is the basic bewitching book. And I've used decorative paper to decorate it. And then I've used these little little latches, and they looked like this. This is from the Tim Holtz grunge line where he had all this grungy stuff. And I've gone in and I've used their crackle. I first used the ink to make this black, then I did the crackle over it, and then I used the vintage photo to go over that to make it look even more distressed. And then I put the owl on there and the clock. And then inside is a white cardstock. And then to get this look that you see here, before I glued the cardstock, the pile of cardstock inside the book, I inked it with the black soot. And then I came in with my alcohol ink. I used the caramel, and I just came in with that and just painted. And that's how I got kind of the brownish look. So you can use alcohol ink on paper too, and I'm going to show you another example of that on one of the other books. So I just came in there and just keep painting until you've got enough, and so you get that kind of the brownish color and the black color as the distress. And that's just white cardstock in there. Now on the book, I want to draw your attention to a couple of things. If you look at the owl, you see these little hairy tufts coming off of the top of his eyes. And those little hairy tufts are false eyelashes. So they work really nice for little small projects like this, and I think it's really cute to add the little tufts onto the owl. And then the other thing I wanted to show you are the things that I've used kind of as faux hardware. One of the other things that you can paint with alcohol inks is you can paint crystals, rhinestones, these little faux beads, and it will still be shiny, it will still look like a crystal or a rhinestone or one of these beads, and you can just use any color of alcohol ink to just come in and paint it. So in the case of the book, I painted them with the black alcohol ink, and then you can see here now I'm painting it with the caramel, and it gives it kind of a copper color, but you still have the shine, it still looks metallic. So a lot of times I just buy a lot of silver or gold or clear crystals, and then I can turn them into any color. There's 30 or 40 something alcohol inks. I can turn them into any color that I want. The next type of book I'm going to show you is an accordion full book. And this type of book is an actual book that you can put things inside of it. It's a really simple way to make a functional book. This particular book I used the Black Cat Society. If you'll notice on the collage sheet, the images are black and white, and what I have used to color this with is alcohol ink. So I don't know if you've ever thought about using it on paper, but I've used it just to highlight the title here, the secrets, rituals, and practices. And then on the front, I've used it, I cut a lot of the label out, and then I've used it for all the green accents here. So to make this book, you can start exactly the same way you did, I showed you with the other covers. I'm going to do something slightly different for the spine. I'm actually using a different set of covers to show you. I'm using these crows or ravens or whatnot. And I'm going to use one of the stickers for the spine instead of paper. So the way I'm going to start this is I've already covered them. So you'd want to cover your chipboard first, however you want. Get this thing started. So I'm going to separate this and be very careful not to let it stick to anything while you're doing it. And then also be mindful of how you want the design to be on the cover. Be mindful of what's the front, what's the back, what direction you want the images to go, if there are images. So I want the big raven on the front, so I'm going to put it so that it is facing me. Facing you, it would be the opposite. And then I'm just going to let the covers overlap the sticker. And you want to do your best job of lining it up. It might be helpful to stand over it. And then you just want to fold and press it together in the middle. And then fold. Now it's a little bit longer than what I need, so I'm going to go ahead and trim that off. And you're not really going to see the inside when this is done. And then just press, 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 and now you've got the sticker as your spine here. Now for the inside, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to use cardstock. The longer piece of cardstock you can find, the better. I buy big sheets that you find at bookbinding stores, but you can use 12 by 12, 8.5 by 11, and I actually cut 8.5 by 11s just to make it easier for the demonstration purposes. And what you're going to do is measure the inside of your book, how much space in the inside of your book you're going to want the paper to be. And in this particular case, I believe I made the paper, it was 3 5/8 inches tall by 2.5 inches wide. I'll have that for you on the blog, so you don't need to write it down. So you're going to want to cut strips of paper that are the height of your book, as long as you can. And then you're going to come in and mark and score a line that is the width of your book. You're going to score that line, fold it, mark it again, or you could even use that as a guide. Score it again, fold it again. Score it again, fold it again. You can see the longer your paper is, the less pieces you're going to need to make your book as full as you want it to be. One of the other things you need to consider is what are you going to put in your book. So before you decide on how wide your spine is, usually what I'll do is figure out what's going in the book, figure out how thick that is, and then make my spine that thick. And then you're just going to make as many of these pieces as you need, and you're going to glue them together. And you'll glue the overlapping pieces. And as long as you have a tab of at least, say, a 1/2 inch wide or 1 inch wide, that's enough. Depending on the length of your paper, your folds and the length of the size of the inside of the book, your folds are going to be different. The important thing is that you attach them so that they're going in the same direction and that they all fold in the same direction. And the ends need to have a piece that's, best way I can say is facing up. Or another way you can think of it is you got to have an even number of pages. If you have an even number, then each end, so you may have to cut something off. Like if I were using this, I would have to cut this off to make it even so that that side glues down and this side glues down. So you'll glue those pieces inside your book once the spine is on, and then now you have the book. Let me show you inside. So it's glued there, and then it's glued here. Whoops, no it's not. Anyway, looks like I did that backwards. So no, it shouldn't look like that. It should look like this, where it's glued flat, and then it's glued flat. And this would have an even number of pages. Now this particular book, I used the hexes, image, and I also used a spider web. This is a piece of Dresden on the end here, and I inked it up a little bit just to give it more dimension. And then I made a bookmark, and I just cut it out of the thin chipboard that we used in the first tutorial and added a chain, and then this bead, the spider bead, it's the same one I used for the Witch's Brew bottle, and a little bead that's already got a little loop on it, and hung it on that. So there's lots of different cute bookmarks that you can make for your books. This next book is one of my favorites. It's certainly my favorite kind of book. And I did this with the Haunted Dreams and Other Nightmares. And kind of the inspiration for the title of the book kind of went with how this book is made, which is with matchboxes. So I like this idea of pulling out the drawer of the matchbox and something scary being inside of that. So this book, I start with gluing together 4 small matchboxes, and these are the kind that if you did my tutorial on the matchbox chest, this is the same matchboxes, the small ones that you can find in grocery stores and other stores that come 10 in a pack. So you first glue these together and just make sure everything is very square and flush. And then I inked the side that you're going to see, and then I wrapped each end that you're going to see with decorative paper. And then I also came in, everything was inked with the Vintage Photo Distress ink, and I inked all that up. Now the insides, the actual matchboxes, you can ink these or paint these or do whatever you want. And the collage sheet actually has these little, the little words for you, the screech, shiver, scream, and run. That you see on the matchboxes here. So you can use those, and they are sized to fit these boxes, so you don't have to do anything about changing the size. And I'll show you inside. You can do whatever you want. In this case, I've just got like I put paper on the bottom, and then I've got like a spider in that one, and I think this one's one of the skull cameos in that one, and Shiver is, let's see, here is some ghosts. For the drawer, I decided to use a chain, and the reason is I didn't want to block the word, so I poked 2 holes. I'll show you inside. I poked 2 holes, and then I came in with these pins and attached them to each to a chain. Put those through, snip them off, and then made a loop. And I've said this before in matchboxes, but just be sure whatever you do that it goes all the way through the matchbox and it loops, or if it's a brad, that it opens up, something that will anchor it inside, because otherwise if you try to just glue something on, you'll end up pulling it off as you open and close the box in the matchbox. And then the cover is you just cover your 2 pieces of chipboard like we've been doing. Now I did put an inside piece on these because in doing a second sample of this, I didn't have enough paper, so I barely had enough paper to turn the edges. So just to be sure that all the chipboard was covered, I went ahead and added some extra paper, but I didn't do this on the original one because I had plenty of paper. And then I came in with the Distress ink and just went ahead. It's so much easier to ink everything when it's in pieces. So I just came in and inked all this, inked these edges, distressed all that. And then the next step is that you want to go ahead and glue the matchboxes onto one side. And if there's a direction to your paper, or you want something a certain way, these have skulls, so I do want them going the same way. So you will want to glue this in and glue it so that it's not quite to the edge. Kind of center it on the longest edge, and then just close to the edge on the front. I'm just gonna put this in place and then hold it here for a second so you can see it. And then once that's dry, paying attention to the direction here, making sure, then you want to glue the other side on. And actually I probably would put the matchboxes back in here just to make it a little sturdy while I am doing all this gluing and pressing and stuff. And then you just want to make sure that they're the same, that everything is even. Everything's going the right way. Get rid of any excess glue here. And then hold that in place. And then for the spine, I've got the Haunted Dreams and Other Nightmares, and I've backed it just like all the other spines with paper. And then I've already done it. I kind of pre-folded it before I'm going to glue it on, so that it's easier, because it gets kind of stiff with it being a double layer of paper. So then I just come in and I just do the edges. Don't do this here, because there's really nothing to attach that to, since the matchboxes are kind of sitting almost in the middle. And then just glue those edges on. And you'll want to hold that, and actually it's sliding on me because it's not dry yet, but you'll want to make sure that it's dry before you do that. Now for the top, you can see here I've got 2 like little skeleton hands. That is the same mold. These are paper clay, and that is the same mold that I showed you when we were doing the last tutorial with the bottles. It's the hands, and just like with doing shaping these with the bottle, when you take them out of the mold, they have to be wet, and then you'll want to put them on over an edge of something and let them dry so that they're bent, and then that way they can grip the sides of the book. And then this is an image off of one of the papers. I believe it's this paper pack here. It had this image in it that I used with the owl, and it says "Watch out." So, you know, and of course you can dress this up any way you want. But that's basically how you make a Matchbox book. This next project is a really great project if you don't have a lot of time and you want to make a little apothecary, but you don't want to make the huge cabinet that I demonstrated in the first tutorial. And this is basically, I took the Potion and Charms label and made a little book, and inside is an Altoid tin, and inside the tin is a little miniature apothecary. So let me talk a little bit about making the book part. Now you can see here that this pretty much looks like the book that I've been making, where I take the two chipboard pieces, cover them with paper, and then put the spine on the outside. And I'm going to show you a little bit different option on this, and that is if you're using a paper like this, which came out of this mat pad, it's a really nice paper with all the spider webs and sparkly crows and whatnot, but it's pretty thick, and especially with this embossed sparkly stuff on it, it's kind of hard to bend around the edges of the chipboard. So another alternative, if your paper is heavy or you don't want to cover it, is you could just glue the paper on one side and not worry about covering the edges, and then come in with, you can see here, this is black. You can come in with your distress ink and then go across the edges and just make the edges black. And then you don't have to worry about wrapping the paper. Thinner paper wraps really nice, but if you get heavier paper, it's kind of hard. And if your heart's set on using a particular paper because it's got a cool design, then that's an option for you. And then you can just go ahead and do another piece of paper just on the inside, because in a book like this, you really are going to see the inside. Then the other thing you'll want to do, no matter what, which is what I showed you before, is for your spine, you want to go ahead and back this with another piece of paper that matches, maybe something that's a little thinner. Now, when you put a book like this together, the best way to do this, and let's pretend like my covers are covered inside, is you'll want to do all your decorating of your tin and get your tin completely finished, and then you'll want to glue the bottom of your tin on one of the covers. Just center it on that cover, and the measurements I'm going to give you on the PDF document give you plenty of room. And then put this on top. Now don't glue it or you won't be able to open the lid. Put this on top and get it centered, and then put your spine on. Because if you put your spine on beforehand, if you make it too tight, then you may not be able to close the top of this over your Altoid tin. So I suggest doing it that way. But like I say, glue this down, then set this on top, and then glue on your spine. Now on the inside here, I want to show you a couple things that I did. Well, actually, let me talk about the cover first. So to dress up the spine itself, I used this little faux knocker, a little metal brass knocker. I thought that was really cute, the lion. And then I figured like you could pull it out of the bookcase like this. And then I used the bats from one of my collage sheets. And with something like this, it's a little bit stiff, the cover, so I added these little brass pieces with just some ribbon to tie it closed, the brass pieces on each side. Now, we couldn't get any more of these brass pieces, so Alpha Stamps is carrying something very similar. I actually think it's prettier than this one, so that you can do the same thing if you want to use that. And then for the holes where you might, like this is made for making jewelry, you might dangle things from those holes. Instead, I covered them up with, let me show you what this looked like before. I covered them up with the little cat eyes, which I thought were neat. And then on the inside, this is stuff from my collage sheets. And then I added this key, since you've got this open area and there's a lot of room in here. I went ahead and added a key that it came from the same set. I think there's 5 or 4 keys that come with the set. 2 of them I used on the owls in the first tutorial. And I just colored this with some of the Gilder's paste. And then this, the charm in the center here, the skull charm, I used the pesto alcohol ink to color that. And then here, this image right here came off of the paper in the Lost and Found Halloween And you can see this is what that came from here. It's got a lot of, this paper pad has a lot of little cool images that you can use. And of course I've torn it out and inked it to make it look really cute. And then on the parts of the tin that you're going to see, I used the alcohol ink to stain that. So that's the caramel alcohol ink that you see on the edges. And this green band is the Dresden. This is the same Dresden we used to do the Apothecary cabinet in the first tutorial, except I've painted it with a pesto alcohol ink. And then this little border that you see here is one of the borders I showed you earlier. It's this one, and I cut away just one edge of it, and it really fit nicely all the way around the bottom of the tin. And then here you can see I've added a little keyhole, and it was a brad, so I had to snip off the prongs to glue that on. And for stuff like this, you're going to want to use your E6000 glue. And then if you open it up, of course, you've got your little apothecary. Now this little image in here, again, came from the Lost and Found collection, and it's this picture here. And then the same writing here, the same panel, and that's on one of the claw sheets too. I rolled it up and tied a ribbon around it and stuck it here, and this was just a sticker I happen to have and a rub-on I happen to have. And then you see all the little bottles inside. And then again, the background here came from, again, the Lost and Found collection, and it's a skull. Oh, here it is, that I'll show you. It's this skull right here that you see on the paper. So that's what I used in the background. And then the next thing I did, and I'm just going to leave this here and so you can see this, is one of the things that Alpha Stamps carries is this little packet of Masonite bottles. So they're about a 1/16 of an inch thick, and they look like this. And so what I decided to do is paint a couple of those, and the packet also comes with miniature little labels that fit all the little bottles. And so I painted a few of the bottles and added labels to them, and then put those in the background. And then I did the glass bottles on top of that. And they've got, I put different, this is a bead, and then this is it's a little bead cap for jewelry making for the top there. Tiny little labels. They've got the little skulls, which I glued on. It's like the other stuff. It has a kind of a hollow back, so I backed it first. I filled this with the glossy accents, and then I put it on. Then you can see there's this little skeleton bead. He fit nicely in there. And then just other little bottles. They're carrying, a whole bunch of these little bottles that will fit inside this, just depending on what you put in the background. And then another idea you could just do wax on a little candle. This is an actual birthday candle. And all of these bottles, most of them, a birthday candle will work in them. And you can drip wax down that, and that would also be something cute to put inside there. And then this bottle thing, when you're done, it's kind of like the bats. It makes a really nice stencil. And I think it would be cute too to maybe put some of these bottles on the front. That was another option I was thinking about, is on the front of this, just collaging a bunch of these little bottles on the front. So it's kind of whatever you want to put in here. Just remember, if you put any liquid in it like this is kind of a cute little bottle. It's called an injection vial. The bottom is open, and it just has a little sealed vial in the top. So whatever you put in there, the liquid is just sitting on the top. So if you do put some liquid in any of these, remember you do need to seal the bottle so that as this moves up and down and whatnot, that you won't have any of that stuff dripping out of there. Next, I'm going to talk to you about coffins. And here are a couple of coffins that I made. I love these. These are the cutest things. And they're perfect for the apothecary. They're small enough that even if you glue something to the top or feed on the bottom or whatever, there's still plenty of room to put them inside of the apothecary. Now, I did this using this kit from Alpha Stamps, and it comes with all the pieces that you need. I'll put these out of the way here. So you get a bottom, and then you get pieces to build it up to make it as deep as you want. And you can do up to 3. Or you can do like I do, which is I bought 2 kits, and I made one coffin deeper than the other. And then you've got a top for your coffin. And then of course then you end up with all these other pieces, so you can use these flat. You could add them to the front of a bottle, particularly a large bottle, or you could just decorate the other coffin pieces. And then, you know, you can kind of go two different ways. You can either do a coffin like this one is, where I've got two of these, and then I've just glued a small lid on the side, and it doesn't move. It's just permanently glued in place. And of course, I covered this is again that same image that you saw on the Apothecary book that I got from the Lost and Found Halloween collection, and the cat is from one of my collage sheets. And then I've just added little bits and bobs here and there. And then the technique that I've done on this is a crackle technique using the Distress Crackle paint. I love this paint. I usually just buy the white. It comes in a lot of colors, but with all the Distress inks that I have, I can make it any color I want. So it's easier just to buy the white. This is a use it or lose it product. In other words, it will dry out. Even if you don't open the bottle, if it sits there long enough, it'll start to dry out. But you can add water to it to keep it moist enough. So that's just one of those products that you should check regularly and just make sure that it hasn't dried out on you. I've got a piece that's kind of drying right now that I painted. And the trick with something like this masonite is it's not very porous, and the surface is very smooth. So if you're going to use something like this, the crackle will start to come off, and you can see how it has here. And I like that look, but in order for you to not lose all the crackle, you're going to have to seal it with something. And you could use Mod Podge or something like this, but I had this glaze metal sealer from Ranger that I happen to have with me, so I just went ahead and used that. But anything that's a sealer is something that you want to lose, just so that you don't lose all of your crackle. So that's one option. And then the other option is what I did with the Dracula, Blood of Dracula. That's what my label there. And you can see I've used the label on the front, and then I've decorated it with some of the black stickers. And I used the E6000 to glue this bat bead on the top with a couple of rhinestones in the eyes. And then I've actually hinged the door on so it does work. And the trick here is I've got some stuff inside, and so I used 3 of these spacers to create enough depth for what I have inside. So when you go to hinge this, you need a big enough hinge that the hinge is going to get past the top, and you'll be able to have some space to actually glue it onto the first spacer. And this is a hinge from Alpha Stamps, and it's on my list so that you'll know which one to get if you want to get this. And I used the E6000 glue to glue it on. And you can also see I've used some metallic stickers to decorate the edges of the box. And then you can open it up, and inside I've decorated it with paper. And this is just, the red is acrylic paint, and I used the pouncing technique just like I did with the bats, the masonite bats in the first tutorial, so that I didn't have the brush strokes. Plus I didn't want it really, really dark. I wanted to see a little of the dark masonite underneath the red paint. Then I've used this sticker that's from one of the black stickers that I've been showing you, the coffin, and then more of the decorative stickers in the back. And then this bottle is just a little thin bottle that I found a long time ago, and I haven't been able to find those since. You could get some of the smaller bottles that Alpha Stamps is carrying in here, but you're going to need more spacers, so you might need to get 2 kits in order to do it. And this is just pure red alcohol ink, so I really was careful to seal this. And I ended up using a little bead that they carry that already has a little loop through it. So the one thing I learned through this is don't just seal the base here, but seal the top where the pin is going through it, because at the first time I put it in here, the red started to leak out that little place at the top. Then I bent a bat. Oops, it's still leaking. I bent a bat, metal bat thing over there, and then used a little jewelry piece as if it were holding the bottle. And that's my Blood of Dracula. Now here's another idea for you. You don't have to turn everything into a book or use it as a label on something. Here I've taken this little poem or whatever by Pumpkin's Fat off of one of my collage sheets, and I've just backed it with chipboard and then added decorative elements on it that come from the poem about the cat and the ghosts and whatnot. And then I have it sitting on a little stand here, and this stand is made for baseball cards. And I use these stands for displaying ATCs. So I took the stand and painted it with the caramel alcohol ink, and then I glued a couple of owls. They're hollow in the back, so they slid onto these ends really nicely, and that made a little stand for the poem. I do have the link for you. These are very inexpensive. I have a link for you in the PDF document if you were interested in purchasing these. And so I think this is just another way that you can go with some of the images on my collage sheets. Now the next thing I'm going to talk about is cauldron. You can't have a witch's apothecary without a cauldron. And here's the cauldron that I made, and it just started with this black plastic, and this I think is made for candy or something like that. And the first thing I did was color it with the copper gilder's paste. Now I had never used gilder's paste on plastic, but I discovered that it works really well, and it dried nicely. And these little plastic cauldrons are bumpy, and so when you put the gilder's paste on this, you can still see some of the black. So you get this really neat, it looks like a big copper pot. And after I get done here, I'll give you a closer look. So, you know, you want to just use your finger and coat it really well. And let it dry. And once it dries, then I came back in with the black stickers, and it's from this set. And it's the same thing that I talked to you about in the first tutorial when we were doing the bubble bottle with the flying bats. When you're working with a curved surface like this, you may need to snip some of the design in order to get it to lay flat, and this is one of those. So if you want it to lay flat, you just come in here and decide where, and just snip a little bit of it, and that will help you get it to lay down flat. And I've used that sticker, and I think I used some of the other black stickers to continue to do some designs down here. And this worked nicely because then it ended up covered this little seam that's on each side, where the manufacturing seam. So after I jazzed it all up with the black stickers, then I dyed some of the spider web stuff, just like we did when I talked about the Dragon's Fire bottle. I dyed it the pesto green, and then added the little crow bead or raven bead with the crystal eyes. And then I decided there would be eyeballs boiling in the pot, and these are just eyeball beads. I've kind of put a little glue there. They're on a pin. This one here, I'll show you this one. They're just on a pin, an eye pin. So I kind of glued them to an eye pin and then poked them down into my little brew that's going on in the pot. And there's so many things you could do with this. Alpha Stamps is carrying a little plastic skeleton. He would fit in there. You know, whatever you want to do with this. You could actually add some big metal rings to the side to accent this. So I just think this is really cute. It's a perfect size for the Apothecary. I hope you've enjoyed these tutorials and are excited about creating your own spectacular apothecary. Wishing you haunted dreams.